This is the rugged Canadian Shield of Northern Ontario. It has many stories to tell, one of which has just seen its final chapter. This year in 2025, the iconic Hudson's Bay Company announced its closure, marking the end of an era that spanned over 350 years. The history of the company, which was founded in 1670, is complex and wide-ranging, for the HBC played a crucial role in shaping the development of Canada, acting as a fur trade pioneer, a retail giant, and a symbol of exploration and adventure. Though the canoe was the primary mode of transport that helped to build both the HBC and Canada, these days here at Truck King, we prefer four-wheel adventures. So we teamed up with Toyota Canada and borrowed a pair of Trailhunters for our own adventure. Plus we hitched up a Yamaha R-Max in tow. Our goal was to locate some significant HBC sites in our home province of Ontario, to help tell their forgotten stories, and of course to challenge these vehicles in the process with some of the same rugged terrain that those voyageurs had to traverse on foot and by canoe just a few hundred short years ago. So come along on this 3-part series that we're calling Trailhunting: Tales of the Hudson's Bay Company. Thanks to the Hudson's Bay Company archives, we have access to some great historical footage that you're going to see throughout this series, all of which was filmed in 1919. Now let's start at the beginning, with the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England trading into Hudson's Bay. This was the original name, but slowly it would morph into the Hudson's Bay Company, and then for most people, simply the company. So you might be wondering, well, why was the fur trade so important? Hats. The answer is hats. A beaver pelt hat in much of Europe was an important fashion accessory for hundreds of years, one that became a staple for gentlemen and reflected the wearer's social status, wealth, and position. It wasn't really until felt hats showed up in the 1830s that beaver pelt hats became much less important, and I always think that's a very kind of funny part of the story. Everything you're going to hear over these next 3 videos, all this crazy history and intense adventure that these men were going through, was all because Europeans wanted to wear nice hats. Now that's the whole setup. Let's get out there and get trail hunting. And now folks, here we are on our adventure, and right now we're heading into Gogama, Ontario. Now when this whole thing started and Toyota Canada came and said, we want you to go adventure with these vehicles, we want you to dream up a truly Canadian adventure, that's when we came up with the Hudson's Bay Company idea. And the first thing I said to Dad, right, was, Dad, if we're doing HBC, we have to go to Hudson's Bay.
That's what he said. And then I said, have you looked at a map recently? Because you can't get there, not unless you get in a canoe and start paddling north. An airplane, maybe. But the closest you can get today is by train. That's it. That's the only link. I mean, we're talking about utter wilderness. And frankly, that's our backyard, Steve.
Right, yeah, exactly, and it's a huge backyard. So we decided to not go quite that far north and explore some more locations here in more central Ontario. Although, yes, we consider this northern Ontario, but if you look at the map, this is truly right in the middle of Ontario.
Yeah.
But what is cool, as you can see from the sign behind us, we have now reached the Arctic watershed. So all the water you're going to see in this video, all the rivers, all the streams from here, they're all flowing north into the Arctic Ocean. And of course that was massively important for HBC because this is where the furs came from. They were trapped here, loaded into the canoe, and shipped up to James Bay and Hudson's Bay, and then across the ocean to England.
The rivers all went down into Hudson's Bay, and that's where the English met the native people and said, hey, we got stuff you want, and you got furs that we want.
Exactly. So yeah, right now we're going to head into Gogama, Ontario, and there's actually an old HBC trading post there, and we're going to explore.
Let's get going.
So Dad, one of the things that I love doing is exploring where we live, right? Everyone loves going on vacation and seeing a different part of the world, and that's important too. But it's not so often that people say, no, let me just explore where I'm from. So I love coming up here to Northern Ontario, because as someone who grew up in Southern Ontario, it's kind of flat, and there's a lot of farm fields, really fertile farmland, but the geography isn't quite that exciting. But you don't have to go very far north before it becomes rugged, the absolute most rugged country you can imagine. Massive rock faces, massive cliffs, huge, boggy swamps that would have been nearly impossible to cross, and then just a ridiculous amount of lakes, thousands of lakes, and that's not an exaggeration. And just driving around this part of Ontario over the last couple days, that's what keeps striking me, is how rugged this area is and how tough it must have been for the fur traders and the voyageurs to get through it all. Plus, they're not just walking through with their own 2 feet, they're carrying canoes and hundreds of pounds of furs and, pots and pans and knives and axes and everything they needed. It must have just been something else trying to navigate this landscape.
Yeah, thank goodness most of them were about 16 years old, because by 30 they were crippled or dead.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, actually, that most of those voyageurs were very young. You always think of them as grizzled old men, but that's, couldn't be further from the truth.
That's exactly right. But, Northern Ontario is a landscape unto itself, and however, the northern parts of any part of Canada, this is where the fur trade existed, because, of course, the colder it is, the better the furs. But in northern Quebec or in Labrador, northern Ontario, Manitoba, right across the country, the Indians, this was a natural method of commerce, because they trapped whatever was in their area, and then they traded, usually to the south, because one of the things that the people in the south had was corn, wheat, other items that they couldn't grow in the north. So that all existed, mind you, prior to Europeans showing up.
Sure.
But then when the Europeans showed up, they just added to the mix, because the big deal was steel, pots and pans, steel knives. These were the things that the indigenous people were very happy to trade for. And in the meantime, there was a whole continent in Europe that was craving furs and beaver hats.
Right, exactly. Let's talk Trailhunter now, Dad, and I think this is a good point to mention. Toyota Canada did pay for the expenses on this trip, and one thing they outwardly say is they like to support, Canadian storytelling, which is, what we love to do. So I just want everything to be out in the open. Yes, Toyota Canada is covering the expenses for the trip. However, to their credit, they are not expecting to, watch the video and then tell us what we can and can't say. There is no filter on us, and you're going to see that through these videos. We're being honest on our thoughts on these Toyotas, and again, that's actually showing their faith in their product. So I really appreciate that. I do want to, put that plug in and shout out to Toyota Canada right now and make sure that all the viewers understand, who funded the trip, because yes, it was Toyota. And now, let's talk Trailhunters. So if you want to see off-road, there's going to be a whole off-road video. Make sure you check that out here on the channel. I just want to talk about on-road, because we've been spending 4 days on the road now. There's 5 of us here. So we got lots of gear, lots of stuff, a trailer. And that's what the Trailhunters are meant for. These are truly adventure vehicles, and they're meant to cover long distances on varied surfaces. So in that vein, just talking about on-road, they're quite good. I really don't have any complaints on-road. The power is plenty. Towing, not towing, I'm good with it. I like the smoothness of the powertrain. Even though it's turbocharged and there's a battery, you don't really feel too many weird things that the powertrain is doing, so I like that. And then with Trailhunter, unlike TRD Pro, I think the suspension, it's almost the exact same as what you'd expect from a typical Toyota 4Runner or just a different model, 4Runner Tacoma. So less compromise than ever. And then when it comes to the features, I'll point out a couple things I like. The first one, the floor mats, I keep noticing just because they are robust and big and thick rubber, and we have been, getting muddy and getting dirty, so I like the big rubber floor mats. All the ARB steel stuff on here, steel bumpers here on the truck, that steel bed rack back there, those things are nice. It's nice to have steel actual, components, makes it feel beefy and robust. And then the one we have to shout out, the onboard air compressor, because we put it to work.
Yeah, we got a flat.
We had a flat the day after we went off-road. We woke up and the front passenger on the 4Runner was absolutely flat. So our first thought was, well, let's see, how fast this leak is. So we hooked it up to the Tacoma and it pumped it right back up. And just how nice was that to have that with us? You're not fumbling with an actual separate air compressor. You're not plugging it into the 12 volt and wanting the wires out or anything like that. So that's one of those things where when you need it, it's so nice to have. And it's just, for an adventure, it's one more ace up your sleeve, right? It's like, oh, you got a flat? Well, we can solve that with the equipment that's on board. So I think they're well thought out packages. That's sort of my overall thoughts. What do you think?
I just want to say that Toyota Canada built some adventure vehicles, and that's the reason they came to us, and they said, okay, go do some adventures. And we said, we can figure something out. And we did. And that's really what's been wonderful about the last number of days, because I'm traveling with my family, with my son, with my granddaughter. And yeah, my wife's back there too. And we're seeing our part of the world and we're enjoying it. We don't have any issues in terms of, this truck will take us any place that we want to go. On-road, off-road. And then it'll get us back home again. So it's really is almost the perfect adventure vehicle.
Yeah. And like you said, that's the feeling you want, that confidence feeling of, oh, this trail might be a little sketchy. Yeah, let's try it. And these give you that confidence. Now, one other specific thing I have to call out are the snorkels, or I think as Toyota calls them, the desert air intakes, because the lawyers won't let them call it a snorkel.
Right.
That's another thing where, it gives you peace of mind. Going into a water hole, going into a mud hole, you don't have to worry about the breather. Even when it's super dusty, that's going to mean that your air intake isn't going to get clogged up. So it's one more thing that, yes, you can go anywhere and that's going to work well. The only downside, when you open the passenger window, it's noisy. It's just sucking in air and you can absolutely hear the engine breathe. So it's just that one word of caution. Yes, it's a little bit loud. With the window closed, though, you almost don't notice it. But I think it needs to be mentioned.
But just to make sure the lawyers don't get on our ass, you cannot submerge the Toyota and expect it to breathe, okay? That's not that kind of snorkel. Even though most people call it that.
That is fair. And the other thing most people forget is other things need to breathe too, not just the engine. Differentials usually have vents in them, so yes, there might be other lower points on the truck that you shouldn't be submerging that deep. Yeah, so make sure you follow the manufacturer's specifications on waterboarding.
Don't listen to us, whatever you do.
And then again, just looking sort of more specifically here on the interior, I like the shelf over top of your glove box there. That's a nice spot to stash stuff. The wireless charging is great, and I actually like where your phone sits for the wireless charging because it's kind of facing you. It's sort of nice to be able to see it. The one thing I don't like in here is this little gap around the phone and the shifter. It just swallows stuff. I keep feeling like I throw stuff in there like a walkie or a cord, and then it's kind of gone because it goes down to the bottom and it's a really small space. So that's my one complaint there. Otherwise, good. I got my monster Toyota Yeti mug here, and it fits in the cup holder, so they do plan for everyone to have huge water bottles. And then I have 3 water bottles in my driver's side door right now, so in terms of drinks, cup holders, lots of spots for those. Even the interior feels kind of utilitarian, lots of spots to stash your stuff. And of course, better in the 4Runner than in the Tacoma. There's just more space in there, more space in the back. So if that's what you prioritize, the 4Runner's a bit better for just hauling, more stuff inside.
Yeah, and even rear seat passengers seem to be happy. Aren't you happy, Liam?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay then.
All right, Dad, so first stop on our tour was Gogama, Ontario, a very small town north of Sudbury. So, what took us to Gogama? Why did that place catch your eye?
Well, in particular because they have a great museum, which is in a former Hudson's Bay Company store. circa 1920. And, these buildings are just really tough to find. So it was an opportunity to go there and see what that building looked like, and also to get a kind of an idea of the inside and how business was done then.
Yeah, and these buildings were obviously all wooden buildings, so there's not many of them that lasted. Most of them, rotted away and they're lost to history. So it was cool to see one that has been preserved, and there's obviously, so much time and effort poured into that building, because it was actually abandoned for almost 20 or 30 years, I believe, before the museum moved in and then, brought it back to life for us. So it was pretty incredible to see. The other sense I got around Gogama is, that was one time a bustling community with the fur trade, and then of course with logging once the railway came in. And you can see the railway goes right in front of the Hudson's Bay Company store there, which makes sense. So yeah, that was one of those little small Northern Ontario towns that one time was really happening, and these days not so much. It's a sleepy little town, but there's still quite a bit of business going on. We saw lots of guys who are up there working, whether it be in a mine or still in the forestry, but it's not what it once was, right? And in that era, that's when the HBC store would have been massively popular and important, right?
And it's interesting and of course important to realize that what's happened is that muscle power has been displaced by machine power. So at one time that little town had 3,000 people in it because there were men who were working every day, whether it was in the forests or in the mines, and they were doing the things that today machines do.
Yeah, exactly. So you just need less people overall, right?
Yep.
So while we were there, we did catch up with Jerry inside the museum, and he shared some of his local knowledge. Well, Jerry, thanks so much for showing us around your museum. It's so interesting. For our purposes, we're really looking at the influence that the HBC had on, northeastern North America, but specifically in Ontario and all these little communities in Ontario. So can you just speak to, what did the HBC bring to Gogama? How important was it? And HBC, but the fur trade, in general, how important was that for this area and this community?
Well, the fur trade was very important. For the area, especially for the natives. And that's where it all started, back in the 1700s or early 1800s. And the white man came to, with the Northwest Company, and then after that, the Hudson's Bay Company. And it gave an opportunity for the natives to sell their furs and to get value for their furs in buying stuff from the Hudson's Bay, and the guns, the bullets, and so on. And they would sell them to the Hudson's Bay, and then Hudson's Bay would ship them to the auction, the fur auctions. And when they built the new store, when I was employed there for about 5 years, and we used to buy furs, and some people continue to trap to this day.
Right. And in this area, I feel like you're almost sort of in the middle between James Bay and then going down to the St. Lawrence. So were the furs flowing mostly south or mostly north, or kind of both directions?
Mostly right? They were coming from north. They would go north.
Okay.
And from Biscotasing, a small community not far from here, and then the natives would travel by canoe and through Gogama, and they knew that there was a store here, so they would come and sell their furs here.
Right.
You see, it was a canoe route, and for them, they traveled all the way to Timmins. It was the Matagami River system. So it pretty well from the north, and the people at the reserve, a lot of them came from up the coast, and they settled here in Gogama.
Right. So what kind of goods was HBC selling?
Well, I would think that in the early days, they were selling almost everything. They were sort of a general merchant, if you want. They were selling groceries. They were selling pots and pans and ammunition, guns. All the stuff that the people needed. And back in those days, those items were the going thing. That's what you did,
Right.
And I was showing Howard some pictures there of a typical inside the store, what it would look like. And, it's very rough lumber and shells and stuff like that,
Sure.
So, but eventually, when the Hudson's Bay moved to Gogama, of course, then the stores started to stock up a lot more. And then in 1949, they built a new store, and then it became a general store. They had groceries, dry goods, clothing, furniture,
Right.
you name it. And
Right.
so the Hudson's Bay, for Gogama, they were here till 77 when they closed. But it was a really, really good for the community for them to come here.
Sure,
Because they had a reputation already, so it was good. It was an addition to what we had originally,
Right.
So it brought a lot of economic benefits to the community, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Jerry, I appreciate it a lot, man.
No problem.
That's great info.
It was my pleasure.
As we left Gogama, I stopped to reflect on the HBC's influence in a town like this, because there's no doubt that it brought a new level of economic prosperity to these small communities. But I was also thinking specifically about the HBC's relationship with the indigenous people. And after speaking to experts and locals, I really get the sense that in the early days of the fur trade, there was a true collaborative spirit between the white Europeans and the native peoples, because they realized that working together would benefit them both greatly. However, as you move forward, you have to realize that the HBC was really a driving force for colonization. King Charles II actually gave all of the lands that drained into the Hudson's Bay to the company, and the company then sold that land to the Dominion of Canada in 1869. That's over 7 million square kilometers of land that had already been inhabited for thousands of years. So while I do think the fur trade did benefit the natives in many ways, ultimately with colonization, it also displaced them from their lands. So these days, the history is complex and it can be controversial as to the HBC's role in colonization, but I think one thing is clear. When you get down to a very kind of granular level in these small communities, the HBC store was generally viewed as positive and a massive help in day-to-day life. I think we also have to recognize the simple fact that without the hard work and knowledge and expertise of the indigenous people, the fur trade probably would have failed altogether. Let's talk towing now, because you've probably already noticed, yes, we have a trailer for this adventure. We brought a brand new Yamaha RMAX 2 1000 along with us. And if you do want to see the RMAX on the move, make sure you go check out our other channel, TK Power Sports, because we uploaded a full RMAX review from Mattawa, Ontario, and the trails there. So yes, if you want more info on the RMAX, go check that out. But right here in this video, I want to talk about towing the RMAX, because we're doing it right now as I speak in the Tacoma. Plus, we swapped it over to the 4Runner, so we did have a chance to tow with both vehicles. Trailer weight is around 2,000 pounds. That RMAX is around 1,800 pounds. And tow rating on both of these vehicles is basically 6,000 pounds. With the 6-foot bed, the Tacoma is a little under 6,000, but just a little bit. So yeah, we're a little over half the tow ratings. We're not really pushing these vehicles too hard, but still, we've gotten, way more than 1,000 kilometers under our belts now, so it's easy to talk about. And I'll give you the short strokes, Dad, which is that the Tacoma tows better, straight up. And I think the answer as to why is simple: wheelbase. The wheelbase here in the Tacoma is significantly longer than the 4Runner, so it just feels more planted, more stable. I'm doing less input with my hands to keep this thing tracking straight, and that just makes it a more buttoned down towing experience. In the Tacoma, I right away feel like that's not much of a load and I could go heavier, no problem. In the 4Runner with this trailer, I was already feeling like, I wouldn't want it to be too much heavier, because it's a little softer through the corners. It likes to lean a little more, and then you just get more of that front to back motion. So yeah, in the 4Runner, I was already feeling kind of maxed, where the Tacoma has been doing fine.
No, absolutely. It's I don't even notice that the trailer's back there.
Yeah.
In the truck. And you're talking about 20-inch difference in the wheelbase, and you're right. It's pretty much that's it.
Right.
And then slightly different calibrated suspension. So yeah, the 4Runner's just more floaty. But remembering, of course, that you've got to look at each one of these vehicles and realize what is it you're trying to accomplish. And certainly one of the things with the 4Runner is just the interior comforts for multiple people, and the amount of gear that you can get into the back of that. Whereas here, you know, in the truck, you're going to need to deal with some sort of a tonneau and or tarps, or, you know, because like inside, yeah, you don't got any room for stuff.
Sure. Yeah, no, there's absolutely a trade-off there. And then I would also just say overall maneuverability in the 4Runner when you are, you know, off-road especially, but on-road too. Yeah, you notice it's just a little shorter, a little more compact. Feels like it fits a bit better in tighter spots.
Yeah, and so you're right. I mean, you know what? Both of them do the job. But if you are looking for the better tow experience, Tacoma's the answer.
Yep. And one other note on towing, and I think this has been covered a lot by now, but I still think it's worth mentioning because even I forget. And of course, we don't own these trucks, so we're in all kinds of trucks. But still, when you use the hitch on a 4Runner or a Tacoma, you need a longer pin for your hitch receiver because the hitch design back there, Dad, is just a little bit funny. It's like double walled, it's extra thick, and so a regular length hitch pin won't work. And even when I showed up to pick the vehicles up, I was like, oh darn it, I forgot that you need that extra long pin. However, Toyota does provide one in the glove box for anyone who buys these trucks. So maybe it's a moot point. I just feel like it's worth mentioning overall. And then of course the hookups on the 4Runner also are just bad. The light hookups are way up under the bumper. The safety chain hookups way up under the bumper. I wish they had to redesign that. It was like that on the last gen 4Runner and it's still like that. So again, is it workable, usable? Yeah, of course it is. It's just a lot more annoying than some other setups out there. Well, folks, we have come to the end of this one. Now, after we left Gogama, I think I really started to appreciate just how important the Hudson's Bay Company was for small towns like that one. In fact, there are many towns and cities across Canada and the United States that owe their existence to HBC outposts. Places like Winnipeg, Manitoba, York Factory, Manitoba, Churchill, Manitoba, Thompson, Manitoba, Fort Albany, Ontario, Fort Severn, Ontario, Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta, Victoria, British Columbia, Vancouver, British Columbia, Prince Rupert, British Columbia, Nanaimo, Fort McMurray, Alberta, and Fort Chipewyan, Alberta. This is just part of the list of towns and cities that exist thanks to the HBC. And I did mention the United States, places like Astoria, Oregon, Vancouver, Washington, and even Boise, Idaho owe much of their existence to the Hudson's Bay Company. So yes, many of our modern cities and towns are only here because the HBC was there first. The influence of this one company truly is wide-ranging, and that's what's been very interesting to learn and explore. Well, folks, as I said, we've come to the end of this one. Now in video 2, we're going on an off-road adventure to really test these trucks and to see what kind of rugged territory Ontario has to offer. And then in video 3, we're going to track down the Ottawa River. It truly was the super highway of its day, and talk about the legacy of that one river and how important it was for the fur trade. So please make sure you stay tuned as we keep on trail hunting tales of the Hudson's Bay Company. Thanks.